Uncharted is the latest video game adaptation to hit the big screen. It stars Tom Holland and Mark Wahlberg as Nate Drake and Sully. They're younger though. Nathan Drake has just been discovered by Sully because he is looking for a certain set of skills to find a treasure that he thinks Nathan Drake has because of his relation to Sam, his brother, who he's worked with. And Nathan Drake is interested in that because, he hasn't seen Sam in forever. He's hoping this could be some way that they could meet up again and reconnect, and they go off on a globe-trotting adventure. I've actually played all 4 of the Uncharted games with Nathan Drake, voiced wonderfully by Nolan North. Incredible games. So much fun. I had such a blast playing them. Uncharted 4 is probably like one of the top 5 games I've ever played in my entire life. And I know that's probably not saying much just because I haven't played every single game out there. I play games casually, but that was like, wow, what a game, fantastic work. And I could totally see the appeal of making an Uncharted movie because it seems like all the work is kind of done. The Uncharted games themselves are kind of like proof of concept of how you can make the movie version of them because they themselves are like, immersive kind of movies, just their games. You're the main character. However, any anticipation I could have had for this movie in particular started to dwindle with, every single thing I started to hear about it as far as like, Tom Holland is playing Nathan Drake. It's kind of like an origin story. They're not doing like beat for beat what happened in the games, but they're going to take elements of the games to do their own story. Mark Wahlberg is going to be the young Sully. I don't see that. I buy Tom Holland more as a young Nathan Drake than I do Mark Wahlberg as Sully. And this movie in particular comes with like a lot of baggage as far as, the high profile kind of directors that were attached previously. It's actually like quite a few. The reason why Mark Wahlberg is kind of in this movie, at least I believe, this might be more of like a conspiracy theory, but I think it's because when he was initially cast, it was, when David O. Russell was first kind of announced to direct the movie, and now he's kind of aged out of the role, so maybe there was something in Mark Wahlberg's contract saying, well, if I age out of this role, I want another role, give me something else. And they're like, all right, well, maybe we can do like a young origin story movie out of this and convince people that Mark Wahlberg's a good Sully. But as I said, David O. Russell was at one point attached to this, and so was Neil Berger, Cormac and Marianne Wibberley, who worked on the scripts for the National Treasure movies, Sean Levy, Seth Gordon, Joe Carnahan, Travis Knight. Quite a few people were attached to this movie, and a lot of the reasons why they left were because they had other projects that they wanted to work on more, that they dropped Uncharted for immediately to go work on, with David O. Russell, it was Silver Linings Playbook back from 2012. Sean Levy, it was Free Guy. Seth Gordon, Baywatch was coming out, and he thought that was going to be a surefire hit, so he signed up to direct that one instead of Uncharted. Neil Berger was, selected to do Divergent, and, that's a young adult franchise. Hunger Games and Twilight is big. This will be big too. I gotta go do that instead of Uncharted. Legitimately, I could be like missing some people because of how many directors were attached at one point. I could be missing some people. Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg were asked, according to the Wikipedia page, were asked many times to write the script for this movie or, have a hand in directing, and they said many times, no. But it's okay because after that long list of creative talent involved, previously we now landed on people that are committed, that stuck, and it's really great. It was all worth it. Ruben Fleischer, the director of Zombieland, and Zombieland Double Tap, and Venom. But the writers are the 2 guys who wrote the first Iron Man movie, and Punisher Warzone, Men in Black International, and Transformers The Last Night. So couple that information with the new marketing that was starting to come out, it looked like it could maybe be fun, but, I was just so worried about this movie I could not get excited for it, and it's totally whatever. It's a fine experience, I watched it, and I wasn't really annoyed or particularly bored. It was just such a whatever kind of movie. The least of this movie's problems, though, I will say right off the bat, is Tom Holland as Nathan Drake. I think he did a fine job with what he had, as far as like, this is a younger version of Nathan Drake and they're doing a different kind of origin story for him. I think he plays it pretty well. It made me, more than anything, it just made me go like, this didn't have to be Uncharted. You could just do like a new kind of adventure movie and not have it based on this, but brand recognition, the Uncharted name is a brand. But I wouldn't say Tom Holland makes this movie worse at all. He's totally fine in the role. Ruben Fleischer doesn't direct it all too bad. Like there's definitely like some technical things that would pop up, like whether it be like, a moment of dubbing or like how they cut some scenes together or even like some visual shots later on. But, mostly it's a pretty competent movie. When the action starts happening, it's fairly, interesting to look at and, pretty fun just because, something is happening. They even do some time with puzzle stuff, like in the Uncharted games, which I figured they'd have to put in, but I was like, it's still pretty cool. It's like, it reminded me, it put me right in that place of like, oh, I remember playing levels with Nathan Drake where I had to solve these fucking puzzles. Really fun stuff. And I'm glad they at least set time for that instead of just doing action, action, action all the time. So like I said, this movie is pretty watchable. It has some basic things that you can latch onto and potentially enjoy. Someone who I did not expect to like in this movie, Antonio Banderas. I was like, oh boy, is he playing another generic fucking villain? Oh, come on. But they gave him kind of an interesting story, and he actually did a pretty good job with the performance, and I really liked that character. My problems with the movie come with a lot of the other execution, and it's all mostly script-based, which, if a movie has gone through this much production trouble of actually getting it off the ground, if you just hear like the very basic statement of, oh, this took a while to make, you would think like, oh, that means they waited to find the best people possible for the job to make sure the story and filmmaking is as good as it needs to be. And not really. It basically just means everyone maybe had a different take for Uncharted and the studio wanted their own thing. The studio wanted the studio movie, and that's what Uncharted is, unfortunately. It has a lot of basic kind of storytelling mistakes that only a big studio movie can really make, to me. Like the beginning of the movie, it opens like Uncharted 2, and even Uncharted 4, where, it opens with the big action scene, you're in the middle of it, and then it cuts, to a flashback, and, they do some of the orphanage stuff with, Nate and Sam, that was in Uncharted 4. It's not, like I said, it's not exactly the same, like at all, but they do some of that, and then they just cut to Nathan Drake as Tom Holland. He's trying to be a bartender. But the problem with the opening of this movie is that they don't do a good job of properly giving you a good connection with these new versions of the characters of Nathan Drake and Sam. So when Nathan Drake starts getting really passionate about, meeting up with his brother again, he hasn't seen his brother in forever, I don't feel that. And I also am still wondering, like, what is Tom Holland's life kind of like? Like, because I see him being a bartender and he's doing, like, petty thief stuff, like, pickpocket. But, like, how else is his life right now? What has he been up to? What is he doing? And we don't see that. They very quickly get you to a point where they can get the adventure started. And I think they could have spent a little bit more time getting you properly established with this new version of Drake that you are seeing, because this is a new version. Literally in the games, Nate and Sam, if I remember correctly, they aren't actually named Drake after Sir Francis Drake. They chose those names and, they just rode with it. Like, hey, let's just be the descendants. Why the fuck not? But in this movie, they don't really make any mention of that. They act like, no, this is our last name. Officially our last name. No, there's no other backstory with our last name. It's just always been our last name. We're actual descendants. I guess this could be something they retcon in a sequel or something. They could incorporate that storytelling bit from the games into the movies. But it just basically kind of illustrated for me, like, okay, they're doing a new version of this, but they're not doing a good job of really selling it for me. Another thing they don't do a good job of selling is the secondary villain to Antonio Banderas named Joe Braddock. The actress does a fine job playing her, but I think storytelling-wise, there's missed opportunities to really hit at a theme or an arc, because there's clearly some baggage and a past with her and Sully, played by Mark Wahlberg, and when it comes up, it's kind of just like, oh boy, it's more so kind of treated like a joke, especially as it goes on, and you could have done something really interesting with that. At times, they are trying to talk about, like, trust, and, the life of a thief, what that can do to you, always looking over your shoulder, you don't have anyone to trust, always backstabbing, whatever. And it seemed like that could have been something they really hit home with, and instead it was just like, okay, what's this character? Let's say Sully trained her before, yeah, so maybe they have some quibbles, but then it doesn't really lead to anything satisfying or narratively interesting. It's just kind of baggage for the sake of baggage. And let's talk about Mark Wahlberg, because that's one of my biggest issues with this movie. And obviously, I said before, going into the movie, I did not like the casting of Mark Wahlberg as Sully. Like I said, I think there is legit, some good reasoning behind the theory that he aged out of the role of Nathan Drake, and there was something in his contract saying, like, well, if this ever happens, I still want a role, but why Sully? Why Sully? Because Sully has, like, a obviously he's got the mustache, he wears the, vacation shirts, and he's kind of like a cool older guy who you could totally see a young guy like Nathan Drake really getting attached to and forming a bond with, because Sully knows a lot and he, can give great advice, very knowledgeable. And Mark Wahlberg is just playing Mark Wahlberg, which isn't particularly a very likable kind of persona. It's not really something that when I watch it, I'm like, I can really see why Nathan Drake would want to team up with this guy, because look at how awesome he is. Look at how cool Sully is. Instead, it's just like, he just seems like an asshole. He's just, I'm Mark Wahlberg. I'm going to do Mark Wahlberg things. This is me talking stuff that I don't even think I buy, It's like, I did not buy that. It felt like he was coasting throughout the movie, because there's no part of me that was like, man, Mark Wahlberg took this character and did something interesting with him. It was like, no, it just seems like he's coasting and doing his Mark Wahlberg thing. He never became that character for me. I could buy a younger Mark Wahlberg being a Nathan Drake at one point, doing something interesting with that character, but now he's too old for it, and they're trying to cast younger. So don't give him the role of Sully. Why make him the fucking one of the villains? I don't know. Do something else. If he's guaranteed a role, fuck. There's actually quite a few moments where, even though I'd say a majority of the actors do a good job, there's actually plenty of moments where it feels like their line delivery feels pretty weightless, and you start to see the seams of like, all right, yeah, they're just actors on a set doing a job, where you're not fully transported into the experience. It's like every once in a while I got that vibe. Especially with Mark Wahlberg. Mark Wahlberg does not help, but then other people would say something, they deliver a line a certain way, and I was like, I'm not feeling it. It feels like you're not into this either. Another thing, I guess this is the last thing I'll say, it's the last of my negatives, the jokes. I didn't really like them. I think a lot of the humor falls flat. There's some pretty poor comedic timing, and Tom Holland trying to do, as much as I said he's not the biggest problem with this movie, and he's totally fine. But I think whenever he does try to do like the Nathan Drake, like smarmy, cocky asshole kind of quips that Nathan Drake has and Nolan North delivers excellently, Tom Holland himself he comes across more like golly gee, he's got like that voice that he looks younger than he is. So whenever he tries to do a Nathan Drake smarmy asshole quip, it comes across kind of tonally off. Like it feels like a little kid is trying to do. I'm sorry to insult Tom Holland, but it really does like come across as like little kid trying to do Nathan Drake on Halloween. That being said, though, you can watch this movie and probably be entertained by some of the action bits. It's probably not as good as you would ever want them to be. Someone who I thought would make a great Uncharted movie was like Gore Verbinski, just based off of like, the Pirates movies and the sequences in Lone Ranger. Gore Verbinski has a real eye for action and staging and, making sure things go really crazy, but you're still invested. One of the best examples of that ever is Dead Man's Chest, where you had the sword fight on the beach, goes to like this building, gets on the wheel starts spinning, but then Davy Jones's army shows up, and Keira Knightley and the two other guys are fighting for the chest, but then they have to fight together. It's crazy. It escalates so quickly, but it's so cool and exciting. And I think Gore Verbinski, considering how crazy the Uncharted games get, because sometimes when you play those games and you are involved in those action scenes, you start to feel how exhausting it is and how exhausted Nathan Drake is, especially like 3. At one point, he even was like, I gotta fucking take a nap, and then get right to it again. I think Gore Verbinski could have really handled that well, but, Ruben Fleischer doesn't make a bad movie, but it's just whatever, I got nothing out of this movie. Now, they do that thing where they have the post-credit scene in the trailer, but in that post-credit scene in this movie, they also hint at some more game-accurate stuff that they're gonna do, and it's like, you can't have it both ways. You can't try to be like, we're doing our own origin story, we're doing our own thing, and then start to be like, well, let's start teasing fans with iconic images and some things to come that'll remind them of other games. It's like, we gotta stop, There's one cameo who I bet you can guess, but there's a cameo that just made me go like, look, it's great to see him, but the dialogue, maybe change that up, because now I'm just thinking about how much the games are better than the movie. You know who else would have been great? This would be my last thing. You know who else would have probably made a great Uncharted movie? James Gunn and Nathan Fillion. James Gunn having that knack for like, great action and great filmmaking and having humor, but also infusing real drama, character drama that you can get behind. And Nathan Fillion just, totally fitting Nathan Drake. As soon as I saw that fan film, I was like, fuck yeah, he is Nathan Drake. Why the fuck did they not make this movie with Nathan Fillion? I don't understand. Like, yeah, sure, he's older now too, but I think he totally still fits, especially since Uncharted 4 has him older. I don't know. I think you could have done a lot more with this. And I don't think they hit the mark at all. I think they made, same old studio decisions that were totally wrong for this project. And now, instead of getting a great Uncharted movie, a great video game movie that shows, hey, we're still trying to make them great and we actually did it, did not really get that from this. I'm gonna give Uncharted a C+. It was whatever. I'm totally not hating it. I didn't hate it, really, because I was watching, I was like, okay, this part's enjoyable, that, not so much, but I'm not really annoyed or, like, cringing or irritated to the point of, like, I gotta get the fuck out of this theater, It was just, like, a whatever studio movie experience. But if you've seen Uncharted, leave in the comments below what you thought of it, and as always, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe. I'm Jackson Fulcher. See you guys next time.